All right, so hey guys, what is going on? So I'm here with another podcast, and for this one's going to be kind of unique as well. We're going to deep dive further into mindset and that sort of things. But I have a guest here today, and his name is Scott Warren. Okay, and he served in the Queen's Guard, and he's also done multiple other things, and he's also a day trader during the time. So I mean, give a little bit of introduction about yourself, Scott. What are you about, man? What do you do? What do you love to do? And what kind of like is your focus and what you're trying to orient yourself around?
So obviously, thank you for having me on here first and foremost. So as you introduced me, I am obviously my name's Scott. I served in the armed forces for 4 years, obviously as part of the Queen's Guard. Obviously, if anyone doesn't know what one of those are, it's usually one of those ones in the red tunics in the bearskins that stand outside Buckingham Palace. So I served 4 years there, did a deployment to Iraq, and um, after a certain amount of time, I decided to shift some of my priorities into then doing day trading. So it's more specifically Forex. If anyone doesn't know Forex either, that is foreign exchange. It's essentially just trading some of the larger currencies in the world. Obviously, with trading, it is very heavily psychological. So I know that obviously you've obviously invited me onto this podcast to obviously talk about a few psychological things, which of course I'm more than happy to oblige with.
Good. I would hope so, because because otherwise this podcast would have to. Well, that was the episode, guys. All right, wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. See you
glad you
later.
had a shot. All right, guys. But so seriously here, what we're gonna deep dive deeper into, guys, is kind of the framework or what you should have for an overall mindset if you're going about work or going on a daily basis or trying to achieve something higher in your life. How should you set up a mindset that allows you to go after life and tackle every single task that you need to without putting yourself back into like bad habits or a bad mindset to where you're just going to regress and you're going to stay stagnant in your life, right? Because that's not what you want to have. So you want to have that forward momentum, right? So how do you create that mindset? How do you put yourself in that position, and how do you like not regress or other things like that, right? So I mean, that being said, kind of what this topic of this podcast is specifically going to be about. My friend here, Scott, knows quite a bit about mindset and has dived quite a bit deep into it. So like too much time. Probably he's like spent so much time inside of his head. Like when he walks up to somebody, he can already know like 10 things about him. So
So very observant, aren't I?
yeah, exactly. That's why you're dressed up in the suit and tie, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So that way.
yeah. You've always got to represent, haven't you?
Exactly. So yeah, what would you say, Scott, is like to start off things? What would you say is like the problem of why people can't be consistent of having like a mindset that tackles things and goes after and bigger and better things in life? Why do you think like what holds people back in sort of a mindset where they can't be consistent, where they're trying to establish new habits or go after new things in life? What do you think holds people back from being consistent?
Yeah. So with that, I think we first and foremost got to start on the grander perspective. Often we are a byproduct of our environment. I mean, since a young age, and especially going through our childhood and into teenage years, and still throughout the rest of our life, we, as human beings, we are just sponges. We just absorb our surroundings and everything within our surroundings, and that essentially makes us us. I mean, who we are as people. So many people then start to struggle because they become that byproduct of their environment. Again, there is obviously that standard quote of you are of the average of the five people you surround yourself with.
Mm,
That is that is completely true. So obviously, talking that from the grander perspective, if you want to start changing your mindset, you need to start focusing in the right areas. You need to start focusing on the type of people you surround yourself with. but also the type of things that you're thinking about.
Hmm.
Because if you sit there and you're just sort of, do you know what I mean, you might not be enjoying your work, or you might not be enjoying certain social parts of your life. And if you are just sitting there and you're saying that you're not enjoying it or anything else, what you need to start doing is you need to start shifting that perspective. And yeah, so first and foremost, you need to be setting yourself up in the right environment. That is one of the first, most fundamental, crucial things that you need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that because if they don't have the right framework, they can't establish that base work in which they need to work in order to achieve something great. Like think of it as like any type of oh, I can't even think of the word right now. But think of a building structure. If you don't have
Mhm.
the base for it, right? If you were to build the Eiffel Tower with just like the tippy top of it, right, as at its highest point, or the Empire State Building with the highest point at it, right? Well, it obviously can't stand without its base on the very bottom, right?
Mm.
So they had to create a really great base to have that building on in order to start building that really tall building on. Of course, so to speak, in vice, but um, so yeah, that's one of the things you got to have, and if you don't have that, and a lot of things, or excuse me, a lot of reasons why I think people end up not being consistent as well is not just because they don't have that groundwork, but emotional connection to like their past or their past habits, other things like that, that pushes them back and makes them regress towards things that they shouldn't be doing or that they don't want to be doing because they get too emotionally connected with what's up here as opposed to what's down here and what they need to be
Mhm.
focused on to build this up here, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think obviously on that, again, many people that maybe listen to this podcast or are trying to start a maybe a self improvement journey. Many people, as you rightly said, they don't have the right foundations, and many people try and start from the point that they realize to try and create that foundation. Now, obviously, it's a start to have a step in the right direction. However, what you're already trying to do in that sense is you're already trying to build on something where it's already gotten that rotten structure. Many people often tend to have many insecurities, maybe from their childhood or younger years, and it is ingrained within you so deeply. So,
Right. Yeah,
what you've
that
got to do
that
first and foremost is
deep
you've got
emotional
to,
connection.
yeah, exactly. You've got to spend that time to really deep dive into yourself and look at those insecurities. You need to spend that time to think about, well, why is it that I do this? The most crucial thing you can ask yourself is why, because once you know your why, you'll naturally be able to progress in any area of your life. And I'm not on about surface level why of, oh, I'm doing this because I want to get a Lamborghini or because I want to get a house, but why do you want to get that? Well, because of
Yeah.
this. But why do you want to get that? And when you keep on asking why, you're going to get to your core fundamental belief of why you function as a human being. And when you understand why you function as a human being, you understand everything that you do. And what you can start doing is you can start doing a linking process. Now, obviously, the linking processes can also be linked to those insecurities, also, because those insecurities have led you up to where you are now. Every single small or big decision you've ever made has led you up to where you are now. So you've got to sit there and ask yourself, why is it that I still allow and continue these insecurities to bring me down? Do you know what I mean? Because when you actually address those insecurities, your mindset will just naturally scale up. It will naturally just into push itself into greatness, and I think that is such a really amazing thing.
Yeah, which is why I like one of the things that I oftentimes recommend to somebody is to put themselves in the self isolation a bit, so that way they can have a deeper perspective of really what they want in life and identify who they really are. Because without doing so, you cannot set that initial framework that you need. because otherwise you're going to run into that continuous problem of why you're not being able to be consistent with what you're wanting to achieve because you're not able to identify with who that is and what are you wanting in your life, right? Because if you have that as a core, as a concept, as a base, then guess what? That allows you to build that Eiffel Tower, right? That allows you to
Mm.
build that Empire State Building if you have that proper groundwork. And that is your identity. Because whatever you form your identity and that basis on, you can then have the vision for what you're going to build, right? It's like the blueprint of what you're going to build uh, from. So, like, you'll be putting each individual part on there, but it'll be an amazing masterpiece once you are done, right? So, and people, since they have this emotional connection with other things like that, right? Their building or their structure or their foundation might be really old, so to speak, like an analogy speaking, of what you're kind of speaking, like their background, their experiences, other
Mm.
things like that. And so, your analogy, their house, so to speak, could be like a ghetto house that's broken down. You know, they got broken windows, they got boards all over that from all their emotional baggage and other things like that that they haven't sorted out and don't understand from a deeper perspective of like how to emotionally disconnect so that way they can actually make the concrete foundation that they need to establish that great building that they're wanting to make for their
Mm.
future.
Mm. Well, I think first and foremost, I think it may depend on your stage that you're at about that emotional disconnection. Because don't forget that insecurities tend to come from strong negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, first and foremost, to identify them, you need to naturally allow that to flow. And you need to, by allowing it to flow, you become as present with it as possible. But obviously, by allowing it to flow, you sort of get true with yourself, and you have that realization that these are the most fundamental things that you need to work on. And then obviously, when you've identified that those are the most fundamental things that you need to work on, then yes, as you have rightly put, that's where you sort of separate that emotional state with the logical state, and you use that logical state to work out how you're going to change that,
Mm-hmm.
because all of this is part of a process. Do you know what I mean? Like, as even obviously, again, you can use the analogy of the Eiffel Tower. Do you know what I mean? Nothing's first and foremost, nothing's going to stand if you don't build those strong foundations. And if those insecurities are still there, those strong foundations will never be strong. And then obviously from that part onwards, once you've got that fundamental basis of your why and that shift from your insecurities, essentially from a scarcity to abundancy mindset, you still have the grander perspective of building that Eiffel Tower.
Mm-hmm.
However, what many people I think fail to realize is that it's an incremental thing. Part
Yeah.
of anything that's great is a process.
Yeah.
Because as to build the Eiffel Tower, you need it piece by piece. It's got to be manufactured
Right.
on such a small scale, but consistently. And then
Yeah.
obviously it's then essentially all put together. It's molded together, and slowly but steadily it then becomes into this grander thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is I mean, like, by having that strong foundation and by steadily building yourself up, that naturally progresses your self-confidence, your self-image, and your self-worth. And when it becomes this big beautiful Eiffel Tower, then I mean, it's naturally going to stand taller around others,
Yeah.
not to show off, but it will be, you would have built yourself up that much that it will never fall, it will never break, no matter how, again, the equivalent of now, no matter how bad an earthquake will come along, or any other natural disaster, its strong foundations will keep it there, and everything that you've built up from there.
And people recognize it because they have that height. It stands taller than other things like that. People recognize
Mm.
that when you go about. But yeah, you have to start from that blueprint. The blueprint being like finding your insecurities, other things like that that are holding you back, and understanding those from a deeper perspective, and really kind of finding the core concept and the identity, and a foundation being the base of where you start to make that. You start to put that into place of what that actually is, so that way it can actually be concrete and strong. And then from
Mm.
that, you begin to build up, and that's where you make piece by piece and where you're standing really high. So, and I that's part of the biggest thing I think of is why people like can't be consistent is because they run into those problems or whatever, and then they think something's gonna go wrong with like an insecurity or barriers that they run into, and so they either have this limited mindset by thinking of like fear or things that could possibly happen or things like that, and that comes from that past, of course. So in terms of like being consistent, I mean, I'll give like a tangible um, a tangible example to this more specifically here. So, for example, let's say if you were trying to get like a girlfriend or something like that, right? And you're
Mm.
trying to be consistent in pursuing and trying to find the love of your life, okay? So, in order to do so, what you would have to do, let's say if you had like a really bad experience with a partner before, or something to where you had a really bad first kiss, or like you had a bad relationship with them and you did something wrong and you don't know exactly what to do from that, right? And they didn't respect you back or other things like that, so on and so forth, right? A whole bunch of things, a whole wide spectrum of examples from that. But anyways, so let's just say like you had a really bad first kiss or a really bad first interaction or whatever, and now you're trying to find a love for your life, right? But now you're going to have an insecurity of like, oh man, I probably don't even look my greatest. I can't even go out and talk to this girl. Oh man, what if I say the wrong thing? I won't be able to do this and that sort of thing, right? Oh man, I don't know what to say. Oh man, I'm gonna have like a really bad kiss with her, blah blah blah, other things like that. And you overthink stuff instead of actually coming up with the blueprint of understanding why, what those secure insecurities are, of why those happen, and like what are the like how to get rid of those or like look past those and to look to something better, right? And then you have to work on the concrete foundation of like the approach, getting how to talk with people and identifying yourself so that way when you go up to those individuals, you know, it's super easy, it's smooth, it's natural, and goes according to you, right? And then
Mm.
from there, you can build those pieces, establish relationships, get better at talking to people, get better at talking to women, and then eventually at the tippy top, you'll have a beautiful wife, a beautiful girlfriend, or whatever, whatnot, right? Or
Mm.
partner, right? So that is like a tangible example for you guys to specifically look at when it comes to like how this is like put into your life spectrum of like how to not fall into the how to not regress into not being like consistent with trying to do what you're trying to accomplish, right? And that kind of leads into like the next part of this is where like, okay, well, people have like defaults with their mindset that they go to, and this is kind of where I was talking about is they end up regressing, right? And that regressing point is where they look back at things that have happened from previous experiences, other things like that, that hold them back from like fear or something that could potentially happen. And that's a really bad thing is when people default to that other mindset, right? When they're trying to create something new, because that's going to ultimately hold them back. And I'm sure Scott would agree. Like it's a horrible thing when people end up defaulting back on their mindset and regressing.
Yeah, yeah. So part of it is in a way part of our primitive state. Don't forget, as a society, especially within the last 100 years, but even especially within the last 50 years, think how much we've progressed as a society. Our minds have not been able to catch up with that. It's still in that very almost Stone Age
Mm-hmm.
primitive state. So because of that, we struggle to fully comprehend things or fully sort things out because naturally our minds are more negative, is in much of a negative mind. And the reason for that is it's there to be a safety net and to protect us. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, back in the day, do you know what I mean? You would sort of sit there and you'll be like, well, should I or shouldn't I kill this animal? And it obviously depends. Do you know what I mean? Is it a tiger or is it a deer? Do you know what I mean? So of
Yeah.
course, it was a natural inclination within the human mind to have this in place for our race to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so sort of touching on a few of your points at the start.
Pattern recognition, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is pattern recognition. So, like I said, it's about ultimately many people will sort of go through any of these journeys and they try to find a way to control their mind. But the reality is, you simply can't. You've got to learn how to manage your mind. So even though we talk about all these insecurities and everything else, it's not about controlling it. It's about managing it. Because once you learn how to manage it, then I mean, obviously from there you can sort of you can expand from there. Do you know what I mean? Because like I said, you can never truly unwire the way that we're programmed. I mean that like I mean this is essentially thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years of programming. I mean, do you think that you are in that sense unique enough to unwire the entire human race's psyche? You're not. Do you know what I mean? Like you still have individuality, but obviously you cannot still use that as an excuse. That's why I'm saying you need to learn how to manage it. Again, as I touched on earlier on, like you where you are now is essentially every single small or big decision you've made, whether it's positive or negative, and that is all on you. You need to take accountability here. You need to sit here and you need to be like, right, ultimately all of these are because of a positive or negative result,
Mm-hmm.
and I now need to sit here and I need to work out how to change some of these things that are affecting me the most. So obviously from that, what you've got to do is, again, linking to the why, you need to start this linking process, because many people, especially in today's society, they're going about, they're essentially shells of people, they're skeletons in that sense, because they don't link anything to that they do to, again, their core values of why they function as a human being. So what you've got to start doing, you've got to start doing this linking process, because if you have your core reason, and no matter how small it is, as long as you then link it to, say for example, the work that you hate, if you link your why to it being like, right, well, at the end of the day, this puts food on the table, this pays the rent, this does XYZ, it will naturally progress you into actually having a better mindset and being more happy about it, because then you know that actually relates to your purpose. Many people, like I said, they separate it from their purpose. Therefore, that's why they feel so miserable and so sad and upset all the time, because they think that it isn't serving their greater purpose, which I think is a very interesting thing.
Yeah, yeah. It and it's kind of funny you say that too, because like there's a lot of people out there that have like regular jobs and other things like that, and I
Mm.
think this is more so like a problem with a lot of men today, is that they fall into the problem of like a typical 9 to 5 or whatever, and they feel limited as far as wanting to accomplish something, and it pushes them back, and as far as making that progression to where they're not wanting to go
Yeah.
past
Well,
that.
again,
Like,
yeah. Well, again, they sort of sit there and they think that what they're doing is hindering them, compared to, like I said, it's like, right, that's coming from that scarcity mindset. You need to shift it into the abundance, because again, you still need to be abundant enough to be like, right, first and foremost, I'm in a first world country. Do you know what I mean? Like even the most basic things, I have clean running water. I mean, I can just pop to the shop 5 minutes down the road. Do you know what I mean? I have a car to drive in. I have a
yeah,
roof over my head. Do you know what I mean? I have people that care about me. Do you know what I mean? You just got to go, like I said, you even just got to go down to some of those most basic fundamental values. Like I said, there's many people around the world that would absolutely kill for these opportunities that we have, even the most basic ones that we take for granted. And yeah, do you know what I mean? Like that's where, when you start having a shift to an abundance mindset, then that's where you then actually start to um, progress further, because then you realize that no, your life actually isn't anywhere near as bad as what you thought. Do you know what I mean? Like I was going through a stage within my college years where I wasn't feeling the best. Obviously, at this time, I never started on my own personal development journey, or I was never even that interested in psychology or anything. And
yeah,
I sort of sat there and I wasn't, so I understand the mindset of essentially the 99%. I mean, like I do understand how they think and how they feel and how they function, but even in that moment when I was not in the best state, I still made that choice to change because I did not want to go to university and carry on down that route. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where the army came into the picture because I then sat there and I was like, right, I'm not in the best place. I need to take action here. So therefore, of course, I signed up to the army, and at the end of the day, I know it's a bit cliche, but it did instill that discipline and it instilled that integrity within me, and it started getting me out of that position. Again, even like you don't like a lot of people don't even have to realize that it's even part of their purpose in that sense or part of their core values. Everything happens for a reason in life. You've just got to be open enough to identify it. And when you identify it, that's where again you can even start doing the linking process. For me, I know that I'm very blessed with that, is that it isn't until within the last year where I've started doing a serious linking process and I realized that everything has really happened for a reason. And I can see how grateful I am. It isn't necessarily pleasant in the moment or it's not pleasant experiences looking back at them, but it's happened for a reason. I mean, the only way you grow is under stress. Obviously, we can still talk about this consistency thing. Many people tend to not want to actually push to do the things that they want to do because we naturally like being in our comfort zone. And what happens is there's zero growth in comfort zone. It's a short term pleasure compared to I know everyone wants this long term pleasure, but by getting this long term pleasure, you have to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And this is why when you, in that sense, get out of your comfort zone, you get in this anxiety state. And essentially, this is what your brain is telling you is that it's coming from a state of fear. Anxiety is essentially the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's back to the primitive state of your brain telling you right now, we have not experienced this before. This is a scary situation. I do not know what I need, what I should do here. And that's why in that anxiety state, you get that fear of fight or flight. Because like I said, it's simply the fear of the unknown. So to overcome that and start creating that consistency in whatever you want to do, you need to overcome that anxiety and that fear of the unknown. So the solution is to it is to do the very thing that actually scares you. Because like I said, because it's the uncertainty and no clarification within your mind. So what you've got to do in your mind is you've got to create that clarity. To create that clarity, you need to do that thing. So say for example that you can't swim and you're scared and that you're scared of the water. Do you know what I mean? The only way you're going to overcome it is to do the very thing. Now you might still get the same thought after the first, second, fifth, 10th, 50th time, but steadily within the mind it starts rewiring the mind and it starts telling the mind that, oh, hold on a second, this actually isn't as bad because you've had the experience of it.
Yeah.
So by it starts creating those links within your mind, and when you create those links, it's essentially telling your brain that it's actually not as bad as what you thought it was. Now, again, this can be in any aspect of your life. This can, as you touched on earlier on, this can be in the dating scene. This can
Yeah.
be in the financial scene. This can be again within any psychological or anything. I mean, absolutely anything. You simply need to do the work and get yourself out of the comfort zone. If you're still feeling the way that you are now, again, that is your own decision. You need to decide to get out of that. No one else can do that for you. People can help you, but it gets to a point where you start draining energy out of them, and that's where they end up leaving your life also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and as far as like the creating like the entire mindset and structure in order to begin to start to get those links. Like Scott was saying, a lot of this can come from fear, and you have to overcome that fear and get out of your comfort zone and do something that's going to allow you to become this better self. Because here's the thing, for example, like I made another podcast about like taking risks in your life, right? But getting back to that point where I made in that previous episode is you have to take a risk, a so-called risk, or venture out in order to get out of this dome that's around you, like this. Think if somebody walked around like with bubble wrap all around them, right? Or lived inside their house all the time, right? they're not going to have any sort of experience outdoors or uh, like they're just going to run into things very soft because they have all the bubble wrap around them and they can't go outside, right? But when they take that off, they live a full and like an entirely new experience because, well, one, they take that bubble wrap off and now they could be hit by things, other things like that, right? It's a totally new experience. And like it may be bad, it may be good, but from it you are growing into something bigger and better, right? And I know that's a very, very, very dumb, bad, poor example, but uh, I just gave it anyways. But it literally just brings back to the point of you just have to overcome the fear, right? Overcome
Mhm.
the fear, take the risk, and do something that's out of the ordinary in order to achieve something bigger and better and greater, right?
Mm.
So, how would you begin to set up this wiring to where you can create a blueprint to identify either like your insecurities, other things like that, or so that way you can start making that concrete foundation and then start working on like your Eiffel Tower or Empire State Building. How would you set up um, specifically like that mindset and structure other than like going out and taking a risk or getting out of your comfort zone? Would you think of like any other ways to specifically set that up or maybe structuralize that in your life?
Well, again, the reality with it is that, I mean, you're not going to learn anything in that comfort zone. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
that is simply the reality. You're not going to learn anything. Um, I mean, like you have to go out and experience the world because again, just think about as a child. Do you know what I mean? Like it having to learn how to walk or even learning how to ride a bike. Do you know what I mean? Like as a child, again, I'm sure many of us now know how to ride a bike and we don't think about it and it just comes natural to us. Do you know what I mean? We're not fearful of it in any way. But as a child, and especially when you were learning it, you were very scared, weren't you? You were like you just didn't want to do it. You still wanted those little stabilizers on, didn't you? But the only way that you're actually going to truly ride a bike is by putting yourself in a position that you never wanted to be in. So yeah, obviously with that, you've got to understand as well that it doesn't mean going from 0 to 100 because everyone wants to go from 0 to 100. They essentially want their results after a day or after a week. The reality is that that is not going to happen because if you've had programming, like I'm obviously 23 now, if I've had programming since I was 5 of a specific thing, it's going to take time to unwire and rewire that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be an incremental thing. It's a very slow process. And that's where obviously those foundations take time because you've got to, you have got to focus on one of the things at a time because you might have 5 insecurities, but you need to focus on maybe the one that you perceive as most important and the one that needs addressing here and now. So again, obviously, the first and foremost is obviously the acknowledgement of it, and then you sitting there and creating some form of plan to change that. Obviously, in that sense, that can be correlated in goals, so you can still make a grander perspective of goals, saying that this is your end goal. But I think then again, many people tend to fail to realize that they need to do daily goals in that sense to get there. You can even use this analogy of like the hourglass. I mean, when you turn the hourglass upside down, obviously the sand starts coming through, and I mean, you only see a few grains of sand coming through at a time, and take one of those grains of sand as a daily routine that you're doing to change that insecurity or to change a habit. You don't see it immediately straight away, but steadily, each grain of sand goes to the other half of the hourglass, and after time, it starts having this compound effect. And this is where you actually start creating those habits because you start creating that consistency through it because then you unwire the mind and you start rewiring it into the way that you want to, and that's actually where it becomes so natural to you. I can even use a personal example with me about even just sleep. Do you know what I mean? I go to bed at 10 and I wake up at 6. The old me was never like that. And now, if I then don't even go to bed at that time or even wake up at that time, even if I've got like a full 8 hours sleep, it doesn't feel natural to me. It feels out of place. And it's because I've done that so consistently and I've stuck to it that it 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 feels natural to me now compared to many people that feels unnatural. So it's about that steady progression. And obviously, it's always dependent on how big of a scale you're looking to change something, because really anything with mindset is going to take years. And even after years, there can still be much to go. But this is obviously where those goals come in, because that's where it increases self worth and self value. Because yes, it's always good to have the end goal, but if you're constantly looking at the end goal, that's still a place of lack. I mean, it's just still drive you to go there, but it still comes from a place of lack. You still need to spend the time to look back at yourself and be like, "Whoa, I've actually done X, Y, Z," and that's where you then actually get the abundance. You're like, right, I know I'm not there yet,
Mhm.
but I can see the change of person that I was compared to where I am now,
Mhm.
and clearly I am a lot more grateful for it. And that's the things that you've sort of got to do, and that's where you realize that even by reviewing it, that's where you actually realize that you've actually created those habits, and that's where you naturally start to scale up in whatever you are doing, and
Mhm.
that obviously is a beautiful thing also.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people like eh, this is for those people that are like, I want this to happen immediately. I want this to happen immediately.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
here's the thing. If you try to take on something without initial momentum in order to get into something, to break old habits or get into something new to grow to become a better version, and if you do it like this, here, if you sprint all the way, what happens when you go for like a really fast sprint as hard as you can, as fast as you can, right? At the end of that sprint, you're extremely tired. You're worn out. You got to catch your breath. And that example of catching your breath right there is where you're going to regress, right? As opposed to somebody who is jogging at a consistent pace, right? Their mileage is going to go like this steadily, 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 right? But they're going to get to this point much faster than this point that is doing this here, right? Okay? Doing that because this person is consistently going up with forward momentum. This person is doing sprints, getting tired, sprints, getting tired, sprints, getting tired, right?
Because just very quickly there, obviously on the day to day, it does look like that. I mean,
Yeah,
small up and downs. But then if you
yeah,
look on the grander perspective, it is that curve.
exactly, exactly.
And yeah, like again, we can link this to what I've said earlier. You're a byproduct of your environment. So obviously think about our environment today. Everything is such fast paced. I mean, like on our phones, you can get any information within milliseconds. Do I mean? So what we've done as a society is we have created these constant dopamine hits,
Mm,
and again, dopamine hits are is a bit of a comfort zone. It's a bit of a nice feeling for people. No matter how small it is, you could have just literally played a small game and you could have just won that level and you get a small dopamine hit. The most successful people in life, they only get their dopamine hits off of the things that they truly achieve. And those are the biggest scale things. And that's where you've got to spend that time to take away those constant dopamine hits, because that's why you feel so miserable all the time, because you're constantly giving your brain dopamine hits, and it's obviously it's under this facade that it's achieving something, but it's
yeah,
actually not achieving anything. I'm sure you like vast majority of people at the end of the day, if you ask what they did most of the day, I'm sure they'll either not know, or it will be such low quality stuff that they won't even really care about it anyway, or they won't even remember in a week's or month's time. Do you know what I mean? So you've then got to start doing the work on a daily basis where yes, again, it's not necessarily nice to do it, but you've still got to reward yourself. So even for me, I always have 5 daily goals. And once I've done, only once I've done my 5 daily goals, then I give myself a reward. Because again, that also helps rewire the brain to then tell itself that, oh, if I actually do the work, then I'll actually get the reward here, rather than just giving yourself the reward and then you're too drained to do anything else.
Yeah, and I definitely think for like those people that are wanting that initial momentum to do things, don't add so much onto your plate to where you can't go, because that goes into that back to that point to where I was bringing. You'll just end up doing sprints, like a whole bunch of work, and then
Mm.
get tired, regress, and you don't make as much progress over a long period of time. And so for those of you guys, especially, that get like a bunch of dopamine or whatever and can't focus, do a complete dopamine detox. And you do a complete dopamine detox by getting rid of all those things. Like, now, of course, some of you may be limited due to the fact of like work or other things like that. But besides that, you need to eliminate all the things that are giving you like dopamine in your life. So that could be like food, that could be on your phone, removing like what how long you spend on time on your phone, that sort of thing, or um, re, uh, reading certain things or listening to music, other things like that. And you want to desensitize into things that are less stimulating. So, and when you do that, then you're able to take away all that stuff, take a break. But what you don't want to do is regress and immediately go back into that stuff. You got to work on that slow momentum to where you're putting yourself into better habits to where you're not getting exposure to those dopamine right away, right? So an example of this would be to reward yourself for longer term gratification as opposed to those shorter term gratifications. Because now you detoxed your mind, now you can start going forth and looking for a dopamine hit over a longer period of time. So a really great example of that would be working out or sculpting the body that you want, right? You're not going to get results with day one. You're not going to see your abs on day one, right? As much as you would wish, just because you go into the gym and crush your workout for one day, you're not going to see visible abs on your body, right? Okay. So you got to go consistently for days and days and days. And some of the people that sculpt their bodies and do bodybuilding, they've done it for multiple years upon time, right? And it's only upon then to which they've created this body that they really, really want, right? And
Mm.
so that's something you need to have in your mindset and your idea and your framework is that point of dopamine of what you're looking at of that version of yourself, the greatest version of yourself. And if you can look at that example of the greatest version of yourself, you can then backwards pedal to find the steps to get there and use that as your motive for your dopamine hit, right? Because it'll
Mm.
be far more surpassing and gratification wise as far as like scrolling through your phone, looking at something and looking at somebody else's body that's much better, right? Or other things like that. And then
Mm.
just hitting that reality of like, oh man, I don't have that, or I don't have this, right? And then you get depressed, and then you can't do things, right?
Yeah,
You have to
because yeah,
completely take yourself away from that, re-identify, reshape, and then work towards that one dopamine hit that's way out there, right?
yeah, because yeah, obviously dopamine hits like they're quick highs, but then you crash, and then it's another quick high and crash. So it's this emotional volatility that you start getting. And again, any successful person, they don't have emotional volatility because they're in control of themselves. So again, obviously by having your daily goals, it's this consistent line. And then obviously at the end, you reward yourself. And that's where you get obviously in that sense a bit of your hit because then you then reward yourself for in that sense essentially staying consistent
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
work that you do. And I think obviously the thing you were touching on about bodybuilders is that obviously we can use that example there where I think what many people fail to realize as well is they constantly compare and contrast themselves to other people, and
Mhm.
that's where you lower yourself, and that's where additional insecurities and that can come in dependent on your insecurities,
Mhm.
where again you're looking at a bodybuilder and you think that he got it after maybe eating good for a week and training for a week. And as you rightly said, he's been training for years on end. And think about it, it's been that daily turning up to the gym and that compound interest of small, steady muscle and steady gain with it. And like I said, you just turn up to the gym day one, week one, where you're just this skinny guy and you're now comparing yourself to someone who's done the years of work.
Mhm.
And this
Yeah.
is what you've got to do. Like, yes, you've still got to be grateful and happy for all those around you that they've actually pushed to make themselves better. But this is where you've got to truly focus on yourself. You've got to, again, it's about looking inwards, isn't it? Because if you look inwards and say, right, at the end of the day, this is obviously the shift. Right, at the end of the day, like, I've still turned up for the gym and I've still done the work. Yes, I might not see the daily results. Again, the hourglass thing, it's the small grain of sand. You might not see the day-to-day results, but it will start having that compound effect, and you'll start rewiring your mind into that consistency, and then you'll start seeing results, small, steady results. And then because you're looking inwards at yourself and you know that you yourself are improving and that you're better from your previous self the previous day, that's where again that self-image and self-worth really starts coming in. And that's why when people truly get to that state, they never compare or contrast themselves to others because everyone is on an individual journey.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, man. And I think like one of the hardest thing for people to do and recognize is during that journey, callousing their mind to where they're able to do things on a regular basis, to where it's like this is really hard and it's getting harder, but I have to hit it. I have to hit it every single day. I have to continue. I have to continue to push. I have to continue to get better, right? And they have to callous their mind in order to look past their emotional connection of their feelings of what they want to do as opposed to what they need to do to reach this, right? To reach
Mm.
that ultimate dopamine hit. And so I mean, what would you say is like I know you've had military experience, right? So
Mm.
what are some experiences that you've had, maybe through that are points to which like you really had to be calloused and disconnect from the emotion to reach that goal, to reach that objective, and accomplish something to where it needed to be done, and you had to be super calloused in order to do so and work your way up to
Mm.
that.
Mm. Well, again, like I'm sure many would know anyway, but it's obviously that physical callousing because obviously you go in as a civilian and you're not used to that sort of stuff, and then obviously going through training, it's a steady progressive build. So again, it's part of any success. It's that steady progressive build. Obviously, staying persistent and consistent with it. But as we went along, do you know what I mean? We increased the weight. We did it over longer distances. And when you started doing it, obviously the body started having having severe pain because the body's not used to it, and they're deliberately pushing you. And that's
Mm,
obviously where the mentality came in because then obviously because the mind then started kicking in because the rest of the body was just like just give up, give up, give up. And you know that if you are obviously giving up, I know that there was a bit of that safety net of then the training staff would then, in that sense, almost give you a lesson
yeah.
if you did badly. But you knew that if you started failing it, you would not get to that ultimate goal. And obviously, that ultimate goal for me was becoming a guardsman at that time, and obviously to obviously serve my country and to sort of show myself off a little bit in that regard. So obviously standing on guard. Um, but again, it's with that end goal that helps you progress with it. And surely, steadily but surely, I started callousing myself because I then realized that, oh, I can actually push myself through certain mental barriers, which I actually never knew was even possible. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like many people think that they just hit the ceiling and that's all that they can ever do, and then they retreat back to their comfort zone. You need to break through that ceiling.
yeah.
And I think what many people I think maybe fail to understand is that obviously when they set their hearts and minds onto one thing, again, that daily thing, yes, the up and down, but that consistency of it gets up to a certain point, and it gets callous that much that it just becomes natural to you, and it doesn't really isn't callousing anymore. And obviously, when it obviously isn't a callousing anymore, you can say it flatlines, but what does that do? That punches through the ceiling and it puts you on the next level. What should you do next? Look for the next thing. and obviously do the same thing, because then it's obviously you're then having to callous yourself to something new. And because again, it's that compound effect and you're actually setting those foundations. Do you know what I mean? So it's that steady build up. And that's what I'm saying. That's why it's almost one thing at a time, because you've got to punch through that ceiling and then you're on to the next level. And then
Mm.
that's where the new thing starts, and you need to callous yourself for that. You punch through that ceiling and it keeps on going and going and going. And that's where you realize that you become the true best version of yourself.
Mm. Mhm. So like I gotta ask, man, like going deeper into things, like with callousing the mind specifically in order for things to become natural. I mean, like, where's a specific moment to you? Like, what went through your mind? And what did you have to do in order at times like, man, this really sucks. I want to quit. What took you through the place of like versus quitting versus actually doing it? Like, where's that point to where like you made that connection of instead of this option of quitting, you went to this option over here to actually succeed, where you're like you're so tired you didn't want to do it or whatever. What did you have to do in order to do that option over here?
Yeah, it was exactly what I've been touching on. It's about that linking process and your why. Like, obviously, me finishing trading wasn't like a core fundamental reason of why I function as a human being, but it was essentially one of the first stepping stones to get out of a darker place. And I saw that as the first end goal to then take the next step up. Again,
Mm,
this whole punching above the ceiling analogy. So, um, obviously what I did, again, I didn't realize at the time. See, you either do it on a conscious or subconscious level. Obviously, if you're listening to these sort of podcasts, you're trying to be more conscious about it and actually trying to make that active difference. But many people still even do it on a subconscious level. Is that, like I said, I looked back at it and I linked it to being like, right, I don't want to go to university because I'm not in a good place now, and I'll go to a worse place. So I did that linking thing of being like, right, I'm on the right path here because that other path is the wrong path. And then I then linked it to something greater, being like, okay, well, me finishing training and becoming a regular soldier
mm,
is my next thing. It's the thing to actually progress me into actually being the better version of myself. So yeah, it's like I said, it simply links it links into that linking process essentially, um,
So,
which
so,
I
so
do
you
think is
would
very
definitely
crucial.
say in between that process of noticing that it was more of like a logical connection with you instead of
Mm,
connecting with the emotion of like, man, this sucks. This I can't do this sort of thing, and you
mm,
disconnected from that, but logically connected like, well, what if I did? What if I did accomplish this? What would I become if I was this, right? That greater version of you connected
mm,
you both emotionally to establish yourself with that better mindset to be able to go after that and achieve that, right?
mm.
As opposed to emotionally giving into this side over here, which is like, I want to give up, this sucks, and everything like that. Which, of course, you could emotionally give in, but then guess what? Now you're way down here as opposed to what you could have been up there.
Mm.
And when you go to this option, you're left with regret as opposed to over here, emotionally disconnecting from this and then emotionally reconnecting yourself to the far greater, superior version of yourself and actually connecting logically to that, seeing yourself, and then becoming that best version of yourself. So,
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, like obviously the crucial thing is obviously linking that logical side to it.
yeah.
I think one thing that people do need to bear in mind is that, like I said, we are naturally social creatures, and that we don't forget we are emotional creatures also. So again, it, again, even now, when I'm still talking about this, is that I'm still always I'm even doing the linking process, linking to a lot of the stuff that I say. It's just the fact of your emotional. You need to allow your emotions to flow freely, because again, it's all, your emotions are purely within the mind. It's simply a reaction to your reality. So, do I mean like by allowing your emotions to flow? It doesn't mean being weak and crying about it. It just mean again, it's still being in that logical state, but allowing your thoughts and feelings to be expressed in the right way.
Mm.
Compared to, again, it's about that managing, not controlling your mind, because again, you cannot control your emotions because it's part of our primitive state. It's always been there to protect us, so it cannot be changed. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you need to allow it to flow with you, because if you allow, it's almost like a river with a current. If you try and swim against the current, all you're ever going to do is lose against it, and you're going to lose all the energy and drown. You've
Yeah.
got to, if obviously if you're stuck in that river, what have you got to do? You've got to flow with that river, and you can steadily inch to the side, and then you'll get to the side to safety eventually. So you, like I said, obviously, yeah, you again, even within that river analogy, you're using your logic, being like, right, if I actually go, even though it's my emotions of the tide, of the sorry, mine just went blank. Yeah, if it's obviously if it's the emotions of the current, sorry, not tide, of the current, you're using your logic here, being like, right, this is my emotional state. I'm using now logic here to inch myself to the sides to get myself out of the situation. And that's what I'm saying. Many people think that they have to go into this heavy, almost monk mode of they have to suppress everything. Because don't forget, your emotions. Don't forget your emotional side and your rational side are
Mm.
fundamental things that make you you. So why are you going to suppress them? Because then you're not being authentic, and you're not being true to yourself.
Yeah.
In order for any change to happen, you still need to be the most authentic self you can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely like a because a lot of people think of it this way, like uh, emotion can be bad and that sort of thing, right? It
Mm.
only becomes bad when you make you excuse me. Let me reframe my words here. So emotion can only be bad when you put it into bad energies or bad
Yeah.
experiences or bad
But
places.
yeah, it is only bad if you allow it to rule you.
Right, exactly. As opposed to is if you're taking your emotions and putting it into, like, for example, that higher being of yourself, like that's where your energy is going to go. That's where it's going to be, right? So there's a difference
Mm.
between having like a toxic emotional kind of side versus a healthy, uh, emotional, energized version of yourself to where you're going after that healthier version, that healthier goal, right?
Mm. Mm. So yeah, like I think the crucial thing here is that your emotion should be your motivation, not your reason.
Hmm.
And from that, again, we can use a prime example here. I'm sure many people would have been through a breakup, do you know what I mean? And then they start hitting the gym.
Right.
The original mental state is that they use it for that reason to sort of either be like, oh, I'm going to do it to get her back, or I'm going to do it to show her, sort of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
But then as time progresses and you actually truly better yourself, you then realize that, okay, well, obviously from the pain that I feel, I'm gonna again, it's pain is still an emotional state. I'm gonna rechannel it into the exertion of that physical state if we're to use the gym. And but then your reason becomes that, right, I'm going to the gym to actually make myself better, as in again improve my own self-image. Do you know what I mean? Because many people tend to start thinking of themselves more highly when they actually start getting the results.
Yeah.
So there starts having that shift. I think you just need to be aware about actually shifting it to a different reason. Again, the whole linking process, because many people, if we use that breakup example, many people just latch onto it, being like, right, I'm either going to show her or I'm going to do it so she can come back to me. And that's
Mm.
the wrong reasons why you're then doing this stuff. Yes, you're still
Yeah.
improving yourself, but then you're still in this emotional state. And then when you realize that it doesn't happen because you created this expectation, so, for example, she doesn't get back with you. It will then be that realization, and again, you're then latching on to that this is how it should be.
Hmm.
You shouldn't
Yeah.
have to. You shouldn't create that expectation for yourself. Nothing, nothing should be expected in life apart from being born and dying. Do you know what I mean? Like you should be in that happy medium in between of you don't expect too much, but you don't expect too little either. Do you know what I mean, and that's where you give yourself enough self-respect that you don't allow other people to dictate how you think or feel, and that you then focus on what you need to truly do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Fully agree about that. Yeah, and if you surround your people with the right people, of course, that's
Mm.
going to help along with that
Yeah.
process because they're going to uplift you, they're going to believe you, and then that'll become better, um, positive motives in order to do so as well. Um, but that's a different podcast episode about your
Yeah,
environment.
yeah, yeah, for
That
sure.
too. But yeah, guys. So that's pretty much like on the as far as like how you continue to bring about that mindset. Now, as far as you guys that maybe um, are running into a wall or other things like that when it comes to making progress, read back and make analysis. Like one of the things that I suggest to people that are trying to be um, continuous in making like a successful mindset and growing themselves towards better things is at the end of the day, give yourself a review. And I can make a separate video on this for you guys inside of my YouTube channel as far as going through specific things. But you basically want to rate yourself 1 to 10 on a scale 1 to 10 of your grade for the day. All right. And can you do better? All right. So that's kind of like a little bit of a it's a little bit of a tactic in order to give yourself so that way you can review over what you specifically did over a day, what you can do better, what you did bad, whatnot, and you give yourself a grade so that way you feel better about what you did, right? Or if you gave yourself a bad grade, then you can be like, oh, I got to get a better grade. And then you can see specifically where you did bad and begin to improve. So that way you're not hitting a wall anymore, right? So that way you put that positive energy and you make a ladder and then you can climb over that wall and jump over, right? So, or you could be the madman and use the sledgehammer, whichever method you prefer. But um, yeah. And so as far as how you guys like can start applying this mindset and making this framework into your life, this can go into multiple things. Like one, for example, we gave an example about the dating. One, we gave an example about the working out and building your body and that sort of thing, right? So this spectrum is very wide as to what you can accomplish in your life as far as what you can apply it to. Because virtually, really, it's anything. It's anything you go about, anything you want to achieve. So let's say that's like your degree that you're trying to achieve in like college or whatever, right? The only way you're going to get there, yeah, homework sucks, studying sucks, but the only way you're going to get like that successful job, that successful place that you're wanting to be through getting that degree or whatever is through setting that mindset of that higher goal, going back, finding what your like insecurities would be and your fears or whatnot, right? And focusing and honing on that so that way you can make that concrete base and start building upon that. So let's say that was like math or something in particular on a subject that you have in school that you're not working as good on, right? Oh man, I'm so bad at math. Well, okay. Now I'm going to switch my mindset to I can do math. I can do this. This is going to be easy. And if you do that, then you can switch your mindset into progressively studying and work yourself into making that foundation where you understand the concepts better, you studied them better, and now you can start building the pieces to where things are much easier in that math class specifically, right? So there's various different ways of how you can apply this. And of course, there's the business aspect of things, right? And if you're an entrepreneur, okay, you have the highest version of yourself and you reverse engineer based upon that and you begin to identify, make the blueprint, then you make the concrete foundation, then you start working on the pieces, right, to achieve that goal and have that dopamine. So that being said, I mean, Scott, do you have anything else to put on like that point of like how you can apply it in your life or like where you can apply it in your life or any maybe specific examples or instances other than what maybe I described before?
Yeah, well, again, obviously, I think it can also still come down to perception. So
Mm,
I know that I've told you this one before, but obviously for the viewers, like nothing is truly positive or negative. It's your perception of it.
mm, mm-hmm,
So if you're gonna go around and obviously still think low of yourself, obviously that scarcity mindset, then of course you are going to struggle. Um,
Yeah.
we can use another analogy here. I know we've used a lot of stories as examples and analogies, but I still think that they definitely bring value. You can definitely bring an analogy of the skier. I don't know how many of you ski, but
Well, if they're around
obviously
where I'm
personally,
at, nobody's.
just like yeah, just personally, obviously, I love skiing, and um, there was this study one time where these scientists were looking at skiers and sort of whilst they were going down the mountain, they then started asking themselves this question of why isn't the skier hitting into these trees? He was going through obviously he was essentially just going through a load of trees, and they were like, okay, well, why is it that he's going at fast speeds, but he's not hitting into these trees, and why is that? So they turned to the skier and they asked him this, and he said that and he turned around and he told the scientist that, well, it isn't the trees that I'm focusing on, it's the route. It's the route through the trees, and that relates completely to your perception of and the whole scarcity and abundance. The scarcity in that sense was he if he was focusing on the trees, he would have naturally gravitated to it. We naturally gravitate to what we actually think and how we act towards certain things. So if we have a scarcity mindset, we will, under that analogy, naturally shift towards those trees and we'll eventually hit those trees. And then we'll feel quite crappy because now we've hurt ourselves and now we're like, right, I've now ruined a good skiing day trip. Compared to if you shift to that abundance mindset and that positivity mindset, you will naturally just weave in and out between the trees and you enjoy your time because
Yeah.
then you'll then realize that it's much more of an enjoyable experience. And that I mean, again, this comes back to the linking process. If you sit there and you start linking all these negative things that will be those trees to the root itself, to what you're looking for to create your own personal greatness in any area of life, then that's where you'll then realize that again they'll start complementing it and they'll just run smoothly through those places, and then you'll come out much better on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully 100% agree with that. Sorry. For me, it's very early in the morning, so like my words are not the greatest during this podcast, but
Yeah, yeah.
for him, it's like oh man, it's like
It is 2:15 right now.
yeah, yeah. For me, it's only 8:15 in the morning, so yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we started recording like I don't know. For
Just
me,
the
I got
time zone difference, isn't it?
yeah, because it's like
Mm,
6 hours earlier here, so.
mm.
But that put aside, guys, keep all these things in mind because if you're wanting to be serious about actually building the best version of yourself, you have to first start with a mindset. Because if you don't first start with your mindset and create a new version of yourself, you're going to fall flat and you're going to fail because you're going to regress into your old self instead of relying on that new version of yourself that you are creating and have set out a blueprint for, right? So make sure that you go about this and you tackle things and you callous your mind and you go after the right dopamine hits in your life. Not the ones that are going to be short term gratification, but the ones that are actually going to bring about things in your life. Because otherwise, well, uh, you'll be stagnant in life, and that's not what we want here on this channel. That's not what we want any of these viewers to be on this channel. I want every single one of you guys to become the best version of yourself. All right, and maybe some couch potato was watching this one day. Get off the couch, go move, do something. All right, enjoy life. All right. All right, guys. Well, that's been this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this because there will definitely be more episodes like this coming in the future. I'm hoping to get maybe one or two of these to you guys a week, and then other videos when I have time. So keep that in mind, guys. Keep that in mind. And I'll also be starting a Spotify channel. So I'll be putting these podcasts on there as well, along with my YouTube channel, and then I'll be starting a Rumble as well. So keep that in mind, guys. And I hope you all enjoyed this. And if I had a chat, I'd open up a chat and have questions for Scott, but we don't have a chat right now. Any last words, Scott?
Yeah, no, no. Well, just obviously thank you for having me on. I have enjoyed it, and it's obviously been good to have this conversation. And I hope that whoever listens to it will certainly get something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you being on this, Scott. Definitely make more.
Thank you.
So. And if any of you guys are wondering what I'm drinking or what I'm sipping on to keep my mouth uh, not dry during this podcast, it's spring water. Always drink spring water, guys. All right, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'll take care and try to have a wonderful day or weekend or wherever you're at, where your time spectrum that you're watching this. All right, peace, guys.